And we're doing it.
Oh, shit.
Welcome, Georgie.
Hello, George.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for coming, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Good start.
Luckily, this will be edited later to remove all of the ridiculous profanity and opening can sounds.
Nah, none of us can do that. None of us want to do it.
Are you going to edit it?
It's going to be uncut, raw. Unless we make $1 million off of it, maybe we'll do some editing. Or hire somebody to edit for us, but...
So,
not making $1 million right now.
Embarrassing to all of us. What?
Not making $1 million out of it right now, so...
No. Just half a mil. Per day.
Not enough to pay someone. How was your week? Both of you.
My week was good.
Stares into the void.
My week was good. Work was good. At a new site. 2 new sites, kind of. One at UBC, and then there's another big Amazon warehouse where I got to do my own little cast iron project. It was just small, but it was really cool. Like, I think I sent you the video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
I sent that to a couple people. Yeah, it's very satisfying seeing it when it's all put together. It's all not at perfect right angles because you got to have grade, like slight slant to the pipes, but it looks solid. And the foreman was like, "Good job." So
What's going to be running through these pipes?
So the one section of it is going to be a drain for a sink, but then the rest of the pipe above where the drain dumps in is a vent. So it allows air into the system and out of the system.
And the other one you say is for a sink, so it's only going to be water.
Yeah, just water and air.
And why do you need cast iron for water? It's like that's pretty durable. It's pretty solid, isn't it?
Yeah, it resists corrosion well. I believe that's why we use it. I should know more about this because it was in our first year school, but there was a lot there, so I don't remember it all. Because, yeah, we had to learn all of the different properties of different types of pipe, and then there's like stainless steel pipe and carbon steel pipe and black iron pipe, cast iron pipe, PVC pipe, copper, different types of copper. You have like aluminum tubing, all kinds of, lots of stuff. I did well in the course, but I didn't remember every single thing after the final.
So if this was replaced by, let's say, I don't know, copper pipes, would that be an issue? The water would be, I don't know, the water could damage it more?
No.
Test time with Thomas.
Yeah. I don't think it would be a problem, but it might be more expensive.
Okay.
Cast
Cast iron is less expensive than copper?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
Yeah, copper's pretty expensive. Because the pipe's made with a really high percentage of copper, maybe like 99, 95%. And, yeah, if there are any other plumbers out there who know more about this, let us know.
Comment.
Leave some comments. But, how about you, Georgie? How's
Yeah.
your week been? What have you been up to?
I finished the second chapter of my dissertation, writing about romantic dystopia, which was a bright and uplifting topic, as you can imagine.
Yeah, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah,
like,
we'll
what
need
is
some,
romantic dystopia?
So it's a genre of cinema like in my situation. Obviously, there's other romantic dystopias, and you can look at young adult novels, for example. But the idea is to look at the way that romance functions within dystopian fiction. So I sort of used 2 small examples and then focused primarily on a third. My minor examples are The Matrix, where love is kind of like the thing that helps the hero survive, and it unites with the dramatic plot to save the revolution. And Neo's in the Matrix, of course. Neo's died, and he's inside the Matrix, and he's been shot to death, and he's lying there, and Trinity goes up to him and is like, "You can't die, you're the one. I love you. There was a prophecy that I would love the one. Get up." And so he gets up, and that starts the heroic comeback at the end of the film.
So love saves the day.
Yeah, like every Hollywood thriller, love unites with the main plot in some way to push the action and resolve the tensions in the plot. And this has a sort of like sentimental effect, right? Love conquers all, just like because people feel like they want the hero to succeed and fall in love, then all of the tensions of the film sort of disappear under that. Darko Suvin, who was a sci-fi theorist, I should say, I wrote in the Metamorphosis of Science Fiction. He talks about this as like a sentimentalism where ethics conquers physics. Because the idea...
What's a sentimentalism?
It's just sentimental, right? Like, it's sentimentalism. Like, yeah, we want the plot to work out the way we want. So the protagonist gets what he wants, you know? He doesn't actually die.
No, they never die. Not in American movies.
Yeah, that's kind of the point, right? But the effect of this, if you look like across genre, like not just in dystopian fiction, but in like broader fiction more generally, the effect is that like romantic plots become like sort of mandatory, right? Like your characters aren't actually really living full lives unless they've got romantic lives, which means your audience is overly invested in a romantic plot. This is part of what I'm exploring in my research, which is on neoliberalism and romantic love. So for The Matrix, you've got like, and I have like, I think a paragraph on The Matrix in this chapter where it's just like, oh, look, things are fucked up. Wait, love comes in to save the day, everybody. Everything's okay.
So that wasn't the first one. Did you use the other movies as well?
Yeah, so 2 other films. One is Never Let Me Go, which, unlike The Matrix, is incredibly bleak. Have you all seen the film?
Mm-mm.
It's based on a Kazuo Ishiguro novel, British film, Mark Romanchek directs. It's about clones whose purpose in life is to have their organs harvested for, like, regular people.
Isn't that The Island?
It is similar to The Island, but the different film.
Sure,
The Island is a Michael Bay blockbuster.
Okay.
In fact, Mark Fisher, who's one of the theorists that I'm writing on in the chapter I quote several times, compares Never Let Me Go to The Island.
Okay.
The difference, of course, is that in The Island, there's this dramatic resistance, and there's romance and thrills, and they work together to survive. In Never Let Me Go, there's none of that. In fact, the film, Fisher says this, the film is about the success of ideological state apparatuses in just removing even the possibility of rebellion. It's about students at a school. And they're in this boarding school, and they're so concerned with art or with love or with whatever that they have no conception of what it might mean to resist or to work together to change the world as it is. They can't even imagine the possibility. So in that film, about halfway through, you learn of this rumor that clones can get deferred from their first donation, which is like really dystopian language, right? Like you're having your organs harvested, but they're calling it a donation. Ishiguro's got a great sense of irony, you know? So like there's this rumor that the clones will get their donations deferred if they can prove that they're in love. They'll get to spend a few years together. Now, this is not an official...
With another clone or with a real person?
Of course. Because they only know other clones.
What's the reason?
It's just a rumor.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's the brilliance of it. Because it's not official. It's not real. And, 3/4 of the way through the film, when the 2 clones who are in love go to find their old teacher, and they're like, here's my art. You can look at my soul. I'm in love. We're in love. See? She's like, there's no deferral. Like, it doesn't exist. Essentially, love forms this rumor of escape. It's a distraction. It's common sense ideology in the sense that everyone kind of believes in it, but it doesn't actually have any real source. It has no political efficacy. They're all dead. In the end, like the last one to survive is like looking out at a field, thinking about all the things she's lost as she's about to begin having her organs harvested. It's incredibly bleak.
Oh, yeah. That sounds pretty depressing.
Dystopia, yeah. And then the film I focused on is The Lobster by Yorgos Lanthimos, who's a Greek director. This is his first film in English. If Never Let Me Go is bleak because like everybody spends their time like nostalgically enjoying the sunshine until eventually their organs get harvested, The Lobster is just like a gruesome satire of middle class romance. It is like there are scenes that you like the first time you see it, you cringe, or maybe you laugh, And by the third time you've seen the film, you're like, holy shit, this is so dark. It's a film about the main character, David, who's played by Colin Farrell. It's an incredibly flat film. There's very little expression. But he's in a world where, like, once you become single, either through death or breakup,
I was still thinking the screen the wrong way the whole time. I'm sorry. Sorry, keep going.
You boxed Eric out of the screen.
I was turning my way. Sorry, keep going. I just realized. Also bad.
anyway, David's in this society where like once you become single, you get sent to this hotel. Like waiters come pick you up like the cops, and they take you there, and then everyone's dressed alike, and you have 45 days to find a partner, or you'll be turned into an animal of your choice. And you're not supposed to be upset by this, the hotel manager tells you, because you can find a companion as an animal. But even then, you have to be careful, you know? Don't pick a companion that's a bad match for you.
Yeah.
And so the whole film is like this satire / exploration of whether there is love or not. That's what the director says. He says, like, I'm not really making a statement. I'm just interested in exploring whether love exists and what you do to find it and what you're willing to do to keep it. But it's absurd. Like, so, you know, you get a hotel full of people who are all wearing identical clothing, right? Like all of the women are wearing the same floral print dress with like a plunging neckline. All of the men are wearing identical suits with either blue or white shirts. You know, like, and
Do the shirt colors have any significance, or is it just that's the only degree of freedom that you have?
you can choose blue or white to go with your suit. There are no half sizes in the shoes. You know, it's got this kind of like, if you're between things, you don't get to fit in, right? You can be heterosexual or homosexual, but there's no bisexual option at the hotel. It's this kind of a place. And so Lanthimos is playing around with conventions of modern sexuality and dating rituals. He's also playing around with the kind of world you're in once romance becomes a search for a match. And of course, you can think of like dating applications.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Or narcissism more generally. But the whole, like the dialogue and the film is very flat. So I was writing about a combination of things, like first off, the organization of romance into a market, which is what the hotel sort of figures in.
Yeah, man, we even got the marriage market in econ.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of models about the marriage market.
Yeah, there's economics of that for sure. Matching according to people's quality and things like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
But then in the film, he escapes from the hotel eventually because he can't find a match, and eventually he decides he's just going to repress his feelings and match up with heartless women. All the characters in the film except David, they don't have names. They just have characteristics. So there's the limping man with a lisp, heartless woman, short-sighted woman.
Okay.
Right?
Short-sighted.
Well, David is short-sighted, as is David's ex-wife, who we meet in the first scene. And his main love interest is short-sighted woman, because the film is all about this like ideology of matching, right? You match with a person.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you really love somebody. Somebody you match with. So, but eventually, like about halfway through the film, he's like running out of time. He's about to be turned into a lobster, right? And David wants
That
to.
was his choice?
Oh yeah, because they're blue-blooded like aristocrats, he says, and he loves the sea, and they live up to 100 years and are fertile all their lives. So, in the chapter, I'm writing about neoliberalism and neoliberal subjectivity, and David is our ideal neoliberal subject. You know, he's like wants to be a bit of an aristocrat. He makes his choices within the system based on what's easiest to bear, and we learn this most clearly when halfway through he's like, you know, it's easier to pretend to not have feelings than it is to pretend to have feelings. So I'm just going to try and date heartless women. And this person is like, he's been informed by other people at the hotel she has no feelings whatsoever, right? And the first scene where he tries to like date her, someone else is lying on the concrete dying, and they're just ignoring it, having chat. And then he complains about how the person is dying and it's annoying him. And this proves that he's heartless, right?
Yeah.
Their second date, or their first proper
That's like
date.
the way people view homeless people. Like, I can't believe they exist here in my way. Like, you've crossed my vision, and now I'm fucking disgusted by it.
How dare you get in the way of my perfect like evening at the cafe?
Yeah.
And their first date proper, they're in the hot tub together, and she wants to find out if he actually has feelings, so she like chokes herself to death on an olive and waits for him to react, and he doesn't. So she's like, I think we're matched.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So the film is very bleak. It gets worse from there. She ends up killing his dog, who is actually his brother, who didn't make it at the hotel.
Oh, and turn himself into a dog.
And then he's like had enough at this point, because she's gonna after she kills his dog and then finds him crying, she's going to drag him to the hotel manager and like get him turned into an animal no one wants to be for coupling on false pretenses, you know? And so he finally has had enough, and he like takes her to the transformation room with the help of the maid in the hotel, and then runs away to the forest to join the loners. And the loners are like the rebels of the world.
So they all escaped?
There are various levels of escape, yeah. They're the people that the people in the hotel go hunting for every day.
Hunting for?
Yeah, everyone you catch
they're
gets you an extra day at the hotel. Oh. Heartless woman has 192 days in her bank. Anyway,
let's see.
which it like if you're me, of course, in my research, I'm like, this is very clear. Like we're writing about this kind of competitive economic system where you get somebody else in order to get ahead. And when it comes to romance, which is like sort of mandatory, right? Getting one of the loners gets you a little extra stay in the comfortable hotel, because the hotel is very bourgeois, right? It's a prison, properly, but it's the nicest prison ever, and I mean even nicer than Norwegian prisons. So like eventually he runs away to the forest. The forest is like supposed to be some kind of rebel situation, so you're like maybe hoping for like a little break from the grimness of the world, but then like the first thing that the rebel leader tells you is like, don't expect anyone to help you. You have to dig your own grave. Like, no one's going to carry your corpse.
No one's going to carry your corpse.
There's a
It's not your problem at that point.
There's a scene where a guy's caught in a steel trap and he's screaming, and there's a row of all the loners, and she's like, try harder! It's perfect neoliberalism. Just like you're supposed to pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Oh, yeah, man.
So the film is really like this criticism of contemporary society, both the obsession with coupling, where like everybody is doing all kinds of awful things in order to find a romantic partner, and also the other side of it, which is this like rugged individualism, where like no, I don't rely on anyone else, and I have no solidarity from anyone. In this way, it is a brilliant critique of neoliberalism, although I don't think Lanthimos has neoliberalism in mind when he's directing the film. The final scene, after David has fallen in love again with short-sighted woman and run away to the city to escape the loners, who turn out to be just as much assholes as the people in the hotel. Short-sighted woman's now blind because of what happens in the forest, and she's like, the only way we can be together is if you blind yourself. And so the last scene is like him with a steak knife held to his eye in the bathroom of a diner, being like, am I going to do it? I'm not sure if I'm going to do it. And there's a shot of her waiting at the table, and you have no idea if he does it or not. It's like the race to the bottom, but the romantic version.
Yeah.
So yeah, uplifting, incredibly happy topic that I wrote my second chapter on. But the point that I'm trying to make with the chapter is to look at the contradictions that emerge between a kind of obsession with romance, which is like both politically and sort of culturally necessary, and at the same time this like economization of everything, which causes people to make their choices.
Be a dig at us? Huh?
What? Fucking economists. It causes people to make their choices in a self-reflexive way. So instead of like, if love is supposed to be this passion that flows out of you, well, how are you going to do that if you have to like calculate everything that you're doing? How are you supposed to engage in something that gets at authentic, pre-social sense if you're constantly gaming your own emotions? And so I'm drawing on research on neoliberal subjectivity and stuff like this.
So how did you get inspired to write this particular topic?
This chapter, you mean? Or the PhD more general?
The PhD in general, like your research in the PhD.
So Wendy Brown's research, she's a political theorist, partnered with Judith Butler, the gender theorist. But she's a political theorist, and she writes about democracy. And she wrote a book called Undoing the Demos, which is about the attacks on democracy that have been like sort of unleashed in various countries after neoliberal political figures have come to power.
Like World Economic Forum motherfuckers?
Yeah, I mean, less World Economic Forum, more like Washington Consensus. We're thinking Friedrich Hayek, going back that far. But if you want to think political figures, you could think everyone from Margaret Thatcher to Mitt Romney. People whose it resets in Wendy Brown's work. There's a number of changes to the political sphere that reset the relationship between the citizen and the state. Where we used to have like homo politicus, like political man, we now only have homo economicus. And this is something she's writing in Undoing the Demos. So what happens when you only have humans figured as economic subjects? There's a whole bunch of things that disappear, right? They're not possible anymore because economic subjects make rational choices according to self-interest.
Information.
Not even perfect information,
The
but
information they have,
the information they have.
whatever it is.
And there's also, of course, like when we say economic subjects, it's not like we're talking about the whole of economic theory, right? It's like a very narrow conception of economic man that is drawn on by neoliberal political figures. It's if Adam Smith talked about Homo economicus as this figure who's like is going to truck, barter, and exchange. He's all about trading and satisfying needs. The neoliberals talk about economic man as a figure who's constantly improving human capital, who's competing.
Feeding the machine.
Yeah, and the machine that's being fed is like a global order in which nations are competing for capital, whether it's thought of as foreign direct investment or competitiveness or however you want to formulate it. So that the subject and this is Wendy Brown's sort of point in her research, is that the subject ends up getting sacrificed to these bigger concerns, right? Because like, I don't care if you spent 20 years perfecting your technique as a carpenter. We don't need carpenters anymore. We only need people who are capable of running this sort of machine.
We need coders now.
Yeah, so like the subject ends up getting sacrificed to the broader economic competitiveness in terms of growth. Right?
And do you think that's always necessarily a negative thing, or does it kind of make sense that some, like, you know, people that fix horse-drawn buggies, for instance, like those guys used to be the shit back in the day, just like your car mechanic, but now no more horse-drawn buggies, so these guys got to go kick rocks or figure out something else. Like, is that always a negative thing, or do you think that's just part of progress?
I don't think change is always a negative thing, but Brown's point is that there's is less about, you know, specific trades and obsolescence, and more about the way that the state's relationship to citizens changes, right? And so it's not that we should never have technological advancement. It's that if technological advancement has always been shaped by the profit motive, that's going to by definition leave a lot of people out, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing that in this case, some technological progress would not be maybe adopted, or maybe would take time to be adopted if it doesn't feed the machine enough. Like, let's say something that just makes people's lives more comfortable, but maybe economically speaking, or in terms of competition or something else, maybe it doesn't give an edge to a country or a government.
We have historical examples of this in the United States in the 20th century. The big three car manufacturers' purchase of rail lines. We have a. What did they do with those rail lines?
Those things up.
There you go.
What did they do?
They ripped up the trolley
railroads
lines and stuff.
Yeah.
Like in DC, the car companies, they just fucked the whole. DC used to have a trolley system, like above ground trains.
Sure.
And
like in San Francisco, like a tram kind of. Okay.
Similar to that, but no more in DC.
So what
they
did
were
they do?
across the U.S. There was a much broader.
Let's say in DC, for instance, the system belonged to
They
a
pulled
private.
them up and turned it into
But
scrap.
initially in DC, a private company was owning this thing, like kind of TransLink here. Or how does that work?
I don't know that. I
But
don't know.
somehow the car companies
They bought them.
They bought like the whole network of and take them out so that people have to rely on roads.
And they get the steel for making cars. And so brilliant if you're interested in profit, and also cutting down on your competition, right? Because there's no rail lines, no one can take the train, they need a car. But as somebody from the rural South, it sure is hard to get from point A to point B.
Well, yeah, the US is particularly good at this when it comes to using lobbies to lobby pro or against one industry over another. Like there was this whole thing for a long time where fat was the demon and sugar was alright. And these days it's the opposite, because people realize sodas are worse than olive oil or whatever. I don't know.
Like the whole food pyramid in the U.S. was made by, I feel like it was the sugar industry or the corn industry. One of these big.
There's so much corn syrup everywhere.
It wasn't scientists coming up with this shit. It was corporations.
They had a few scientists involved.
The ones hired by Kellogg's to say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and made a paper about it. It's like, oh, who was it funded by? By Kellogg's. Huh. Interesting.
But
the guys who
Brown's-
actually make it.
Brown's research isn't really about technology so much as it is about what happens to human subjects when you're in this kind of a world, right? And one of the major points she makes is that there are certain things about human life that can't be economized.
Mm-hmm. Such as?
Well, for one, elder care.
Well, people get paid for elder care.
Sure, you can get paid for elder care, but how is...
But it's like if you're doing it for your family member, then nobody pays you for it.
That's one example. Another way of thinking about it is people can get paid for elder care if the elder has the money to pay someone.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a system that prejudices and deeply prejudices working people in terms of income,
Mm-hmm.
and also doesn't hire older people,
Mm-hmm.
like you don't have to be a statistician to figure out how this goes.
Yeah.
All you have to do is look at the number of seniors in desperate housing situations, and you can kind of see elder care, child care,
Mm-hmm.
the social infrastructures that make a neighborhood work,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're lucky we live in Canada where people have parental leave, which is beautiful because the government pays you to raise your child. Whereas
Yeah.
in the U.S., it's not the case.
It only pays you to raise your child if you have a job.
Ah,
And this is where the economic subject comes back in, right?
interesting. I never thought about that.
Well, you still do get benefits for having a child, even if you don't have a job. You get a couple of tax credits here and there, which are
Not anywhere near the cost of raising a kid.
absolutely absolutely, and no, I know, I agree.
The point is that once the government resets its priorities, instead of saying we're going to regulate the economy so that it works for our citizens, instead we're going to regulate our citizens so they work for the economy. It changes the relationship between the state and the citizen. And she writes quite a bit, like she draws on Aristotle, goes all the way back, and then looks at 20th century philosophers as well. But I was drawn to my research because, wait a second, if we have an economic subject who's like always economizing their behaviors, and not necessarily monetizing, right? Slight difference. You don't have to turn everything into cash. You just have to find a way to make this particular activity economical for you. Maybe you think of your own pleasure as an economic result, right? In the Chicago school style. Becker used to say that women who took care of their kids, Gary Becker, the neoliberal economist from Chicago, just in case anybody listening doesn't know.
True.
Of course you know Gary Becker, because I make fun of Gary Becker all the time. He used to say that women who took care of their kids, and of course in his model it's women who take care of their kids, right? Get a sort of psychic revenue for this. You know, they feel good about having done this work that is unwaged and that no one incentivizes them for. But once you establish a system where everybody's supposed to be following this sort of economize, like a bunch of work that used to get done, that needs to get done, is no longer profitable and can't be profitable.
Well, it changes people's sense of priorities too.
Of course.
People will be more focused on things that actually are gonna, well, not necessarily bring cash as you said, but are gonna have an economic value. They're gonna allocate their time differently.
Yeah.
Maybe let's care towards the elderly because they got no time for this. They're gonna go into the next whatever productive thing they can do to achieve their goals or to stay in the race, I guess.
Yeah, and at the same time, neoliberal political figures, and this is the contradiction I've been interested to explore, neoliberal political figures are deeply invested in the family. Margaret Thatcher, there is no society, there's only men and women and their families. Milton Friedman eventually said, well, it's not the individual, it's really the family who's the ultimate operative unit. And this goes across the board.
Household, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, if you look at the household, now here's an interesting thing. We have an individual, and Brown, this is from straight out of Brown. If you have an individual who's kind of your economic subject, and then you have a household that's really the operative unit, what's our problem? These are obviously heteronormative households. Like, we don't have to look at Milton Friedman's politics too closely to figure that one out. Thatcher, duh. the woman in the house is just an accessory to the man who's the head of household. Now, of course, the woman could be the head of household and the man could be the accessory, but the point is the dynamic is still there.
Do they explicitly say men and women, or do they mean like primary earner and secondary earner?
It doesn't matter how they code it. The result is the same. They're in a heteronormative society. You can say, yeah, I mean secondary earner or whatever, but in the end, they're setting up an economic model that's built on, but does not acknowledge its basis in this sort of family.
It's a different time for them. For them, the reference, they look at the stats back then. Probably was the nuclear family where most of the husbands were having the job, and most of the mothers were staying at home, and some of them were working. Maybe that's why they were using this as a reference, because Thatcher and Friedman are from the 70s,
80s.
Yeah, 70s, 80s.
But the point here isn't just the reference. It's when you build a society on this economic basis, when you say the family is the political unit we're concerned with. It doesn't matter whether the families are queer or not.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is you have the person who's got real economic political agency, who's in charge of the family, who is almost all the time is going to be a man.
But why must there be one? If they mean the household, they don't care how the household is composed. Is it like a working woman and dad at home, or two dads or two moms? It doesn't matter. Or everybody's working. It doesn't matter. They just say it's a household. Yeah. They are the ones making the decisions in terms of like buying, consuming, doing whatever. They're the ones making the big decisions that the government cares about in terms of which are economically relevant.
Sure, but who does the unwaged labor at home?
But usually women.
Yeah, but they do not care so much about it.
Of course not. They're not interested in it. They're not feminist economists, right? They're not actually concerned in the GDP, which the GDP of housework or whatever.
Well, but that's the thing. They look at what's economically, like what can be measurable, and domestic production is very hard to measure. They're still on it. I'm sure now there are indicators, but it's still not there. They still use GDP as the main measure, and GDP is whatever you can produce. That is monetized.
Yeah, goods and services.
Yes.
Whether it's
can't be monetized.
No, of course. But
and this is the problem, is once you have a system that says what can be monetized is relevant, and all this stuff that can't be monetized is not so relevant anymore.
Agreed.
Then we have a real problem, because the stuff that can't be monetized is actually essential for human life.
Agreed. What you can say though, you can also argue and say that you can do more for the economically relevant part if the non-economically relevant part is also well taken care of. For instance, if you're in good health or if you're happy, you're more productive. That's one of the things we usually say. So they also say in this sense that the non-economic stuff is also important. You cannot just work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day with full brain power on and hope this person to be productive for like 6 months straight. And they need the rest. They need all those things. So they also, I guess, they also value this non-economically relevant activities.
But if you look at the political decisions taken by these leaders,
it's whatever can be measured, and what's measured is what the market shows.
For example, with Reagan in the United States, at the beginning of Reagan's term, the minimum wage is equal to the poverty line. By the end of the decade, it's below it. It's 33% below it. So that working a minimum wage job puts you in poverty. Now, this is helpful for the U.S.'s economic recovery from the long downturn of the mid to late 20th century, because it pours a bunch of people into jobs where they're just horrifically exploited and a lot of money is transferred to their bosses. But it's not so helpful in setting up livable lives for them, right? My first chapter is more about that downturn period, looking at pop songs.
Reagan was, in the 70s as well? 80s.
Yeah.
So that was after the oil shocks.
Yep.
So that's what he was trying to recover from.
Partially,
I assume.
Partially from the oil shocks, but there's arguments about what actually caused the end of profitability in the 20th century, about 75, right? Different arguments. Brenner's argument is that it was a system-wide manufacturing overcapacity. There's just too much stuff being made for it to be profitable.
In the 70s?
Yeah. The profitability is pretty much the declining rate of profit from 75. 73 maybe if you want to look at certain
so you're
areas.
saying economic activity became less profitable?
The rate of profit in terms of investment in a capitalist enterprise from the post-war period up until about 75, you have growth in the economic system. After 75, that growth is over. Within 10 years, every one of the major capitalist countries has reduced their social expenditures by a significant amount, including Japan. It doesn't matter whether they're a democratic country or like a state-centered capitalist country, or they've got a socialist government, or they've got a right-wing government. They've all done the same thing within 10 years.
Just like austerity.
In 1981, one of the first left-wing presidents in France came in power, and he launched a massive Keynesian social stimulus. It's like, oh, we're gonna give money to people, they're gonna buy, and that's gonna put the activity back on. So I forgot how they injected the money, but pretty much people had some money. And what they did is, instead of buying French stuff, they started buying the Korean TVs, the Chinese microwave, and so on. Everything was counted as imports. So GDP didn't increase because everybody was buying stuff not produced in France.
Yeah, and
that was the funny downside of it.
And this is
worked hard on the Keynesian stuff. They're like, oh, he worked in the 30s. We can do it in France again. Like, it can happen again. It's like, yeah, nope. We're just not buying French this time.
And you can't expect them to because you've deregulated imports,
cheers,
right?
buddies.
Right, cheers.
Well, you can always, there are different ways to do it. Like, instead of letting people just consume whatever they want or save whatever they want, because if people are not confident about the future, they'll just keep the money and say, I don't know, taxes will increase in the future. I prefer to save or whatever. I'm not confident. Or you could say, well, we're going to give you a discount of some sort if you buy something French in France as opposed to something from another country. And maybe they're going to consider buying something French. That's what happened in the beginning of 2000s. They had this thing where if you bring your car, I forgot, but if you bring your car pretty much to the junkyard, you get some money, and I think the money you get might depend on whether you're going to buy a French car or not. There was something like that. There was this kind of stimulus to give incentives to French people to buy French cars, because it's very easy for us to buy German cars, right? It's next door. It's a bit more expensive, but it's so much better quality-wise. Apparently, I'm not such a driver to tell. I had a French car; it was fantastic.
Yeah, Citroen or Renault.
Yeah, I had a Peugeot,
Peugeot,
which now is with Citroën. They're together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I find that weird that France doesn't seem to export cars the same way Germany does, or Japan. Like Japan is on it.
None. You won't find a single French car in North America overall.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure a French person is gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna ship my car, in a boat across the Atlantic Ocean. No, they're gonna buy a Ford or Chevy here, whatever, or Dodge, whatever.
A Toyota is what they're going to buy here.
Oh yeah, Toyota. There you go. Yeah, sure, Yaris of some sort.
If you want it to last, then you'll buy a Toyota.
It's cars. I don't know, and it's not that they break or anything because they work fine. They consume okay, and I guess. But Germans have this reputation of just being top notch.
Yeah.
So might
Except
as well
when
spend.
it comes to honesty on their emissions.
Yeah, that Volkswagen scandal is pretty funny.
Oh, what happened?
So,
They
Volkswagen.
made up their own numbers.
Yeah, they had. No, it's even worse than that. Like, they were selling cars that were diesel cars that had really good acceleration, because usually diesels don't have as good acceleration.
That I know. Yeah.
And really good emissions standards. Like, it didn't release as many chemicals into the atmosphere. And so, in the US, you have to get your car emissions tested. So you drive into a place, they figure out how much smog is coming out of your car. And the Volkswagens had some specific sequence of things that would happen in the car, like when you're doing an emissions test, and it would change the profile of how the engine was burning, so it looked like it was putting out less smog than it really was.
They programmed a cheat code in it.
Yeah.
That's smart. If I may say. Hey. But they got caught. So how did they get caught?
I forget exactly how they got,
Okay.
but they got
Somebody
caught
figured the
and
source
then-
code of the car?
I wonder how that went.
Yeah, you see what I mean?
wonder
I'm
how
like-
that went down.
Or was there a guy at Volkswagen who was like, nah, I know what's going on, and they pretty much ratted out or something?
I don't think it was that.
No?
I don't think it was that. Yeah, it was a big scandal. It was a big scandal. But
Don't
Yeah, it
worry,
would've been
everyone forgot. They had a nice ad campaign about how great Volkswagens were, and now they're back to being a major seller, despite the fact that the company just straight up tricks you.
yeah,
It seems like, I don't know if it's something that is new or that's something that always existed, but it seems that we in general, people, are easily forgetful. We easily forget those things. and like big mishaps and big scandals and stuff. It seems that we don't. We can be very angry at whatever firm or company or a person for doing something at some point. And a couple of years later, we barely, oh yeah, there was this guy or this company, they did this, right? Oh yeah. What about now? Oh, they still make billions. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the thing is people don't really care that much what corporations do, unfortunately.
True.
As long as they get their products at a right price and it looks cool and drives cool and...
But there's so much to care about when you think about it. There's so much information to take in, and you know, for the average Joe who has to take care of his house, pay his bills, do his things, it's like, well, I need a car that works well, not too expensive, to take to drag my ass to work, and then I need to work, which is gonna take my brain for 8 hours minimum, and then I gotta, then I go home and got a family to take care of or other things, and also this idea probably that, knowing that each one of us on our own have no power. I think a lot of people accept that. They're like, well, what can I do about it anyway? So might as well just be part of the system at this stage.
No, it's like if I don't buy it, somebody else is going to buy it.
Exactly.
So
Or somebody else will take that job, or somebody else will do that thing. And it's like, well, might as well be me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the reasons that my research, just to bring it back to my research, because I'm a self-interested bastard.
No, please.
Neoliberal.
We asked you about your
You're so
research.
neoliberal, man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
I'm here to build my social capital. In the basement suite with my friends. But one of my concerns and one of my interests has been what keeps people in a system that is so manifestly fucked, like rising inequality, decreasing quality of life. In the 21st century, a generation of people have been told for the first time in some time that their lives are going to be worse than their parents. They got to get over it.
True.
What keeps people from going and saying, fuck this, I'm getting together with my buddies, I'm going to make some friends, and even not some friends, I'm going to have people in the community who I have something in common with, and we're going to change this shit. Right? What stops them from doing that? And so that's why I'm looking at Never Let Me Go, right? That's why I'm looking at The Lobster.
I think social media would have an impact on that. I think social media, it's just it could be a byproduct of these things, but it seems to be a very good divide and conquer. In France, it didn't bring as much people in the streets when there were important protests and so on. By being fed certain content and by referring yourself to that content, whatever you're being fed on social media, whatever people are looking at.
I don't know, I think people just don't feel like they have power to do anything. It's like I could put all this effort into building a community and trying to stand up to the big tyranny
guys.
Of the economic system. It's kind of like, well, it's always been this way. If we stick our neck out, we might just get arrested or shot or there's not a lot of hope given to people that they could actually change things, I feel like.
And what there is given though are all of these ways you can put your effort into building your own little way of life. Like the romantic couple, which is the focus of my research, right? If you just, find someone you really love and you put your effort into that, that's really the support. That's really the thing. And family, of course, grows out of this in liberal countries anyway. Lowercase L liberal. It's very interesting to me because the couple and the family are the largest social unit that neoliberalism will admit. It's like, we'll do individuals or we'll do families. The community is like an abstract thing. It's not like they talk about communities, but they just pick who they want to be the community, right? They have a community consultation, 25 opinions are expressed, they pick the 10 they like. This is an old tactic. But when it comes to the family, we have an actual political unit, right? Determines where you spend your money and your time.
Yeah.
I think we should take a break.
Let's take a break here. See you soon.